to the next episode in our IWG YouTube channel. My name is Axel Meyerhöfer and I'm the founder of Ideal Wealth Grower and your host for today's video. So you see me sitting today in front of our new sunflower little patch, and it's sometimes kind of interesting when you think about it because sometimes, as a grower, and we're not just growing our passive income and our wealth, when we also love to grow stuff in the garden. So as a grower, you put seeds out and stuff like that, and you hope that things are actually going well and that they're actually growing well and so forth and so forth. And last year we put some seeds out for sunflowers here in this exact same spot, and we got literally one sunflower. And I was like kind of disappointed. I thought, well, obviously that didn't work so well, or maybe we didn't care for it well enough. But what we didn't know is that we obviously had a couple of little helpers, because that one sunflower got a flower, got some pollination, got some seeds, and obviously some of the birds around must have spread a whole bunch of seeds that I didn't see fall into the ground. And now we have a really beautiful up and coming sunflower patch. So growing doesn't necessarily always happen overnight. Sometimes you have to be willing to be patient and spend a little bit of time and look how things develop year over year, not just in the short term, even though we are all more and more conditioned to be interested on how can we get instant gratification, how can things happen very quickly for us. So today's topic that I wanted to raise is around a name and a figure and a concept that is somewhat, I would say, controversial in the real estate investing space. And that is the name Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey, for those of you who don't know him, you can Google him, you can look at his YouTube channel. He is massively, massively successful. He has been in investing and giving advice to people in investing and people in general for decades. And he has a huge following. And you would say, okay, well, if he is so successful and he has this huge following and things are really into what he is suggesting, why is it controversial? And I would like to basically put a little bit of a yin-yang kind of like balancing act on what he is doing and why it is not necessarily always appreciated in the investing community, especially in the real estate investing community. So Dave, in fundamental terms, says you want to get rid of debt and live a debt-free life, which would mean, if you go to our abbreviation of the word ideal, right? If you ever ask yourself, ideal and ideal wealth grower, is that just an ideal way to grow wealth, or is there more to it? And yes, there is more to it. There is ideal as the word, and for us, ideal means use the out-of-state residential real estate investing strategy with turnkey providers. But ideal is also an abbreviation. And each of the letters stands for something. So the I stands for income, the D stands for depreciation, the E stands for equity, the A stands for appreciation, and the L stands for leverage. Right? And so the last letter in this, leverage, is basically the summary term for using other people's money to grow your wealth. Right? So what does that mean in practical terms? If you say, I have $20,000 or $25,000, and you were to go anywhere in the marketplace, it is highly, highly, highly unlikely that you would be able to find a single family house, home, or a residence, or a duplex, triplex, fourplex, which is part of what fits into our residential real estate investing strategy for that amount of money. Or if you were to find one, like I said, this rare case, it's probably completely falling apart, been sitting there empty, no windows, no doors and stuff like that. And that doesn't really help you because you couldn't rent it. Right, so you would have to spend, I don't know, $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 to make it livable, which if all you have is $25,000, it doesn't really help, neither in our strategy nor in general. Now, how is this relevant to leverage and Dave Ramsey? Dave Ramsey fundamentally says, if you are in debt, try to find a way to get out of that. And he gives all kinds of trainings and advice on how you can actually do it. One of the things he, for example, recommends, like I do, is the same thing like the richest man in Babylon did, is take 10% of your income, anything that comes in right away when it comes in, and use it in Dave's system to pay off debt, and in our system to put into your accumulation account. Now you would say, okay, well, if that's the situation, are you saying first get rid of all debt and then start an accumulation account? And I would say, no, that's not the case. There is a point between what I say is good debt that has an asset associated with it that is actually or has the potential to increase in value. And the debt that Dave Ramsey is talking about is the debt that is typically consumer debt, meaning it is associated with something that is either losing value or already has no value anymore. So just think about it. You go to a clothing store and you use your credit card and you buy the clothes, and then you pay at the end of the month the minimum payment for the credit card. And you do this 2 or 3 months in a row, and then you find Dave Ramsey's programs and video channel and so forth, and he says, you should get rid of your debt. And here's my program, and here's my advice, and here are all my strategies and so forth to get rid of your debt. Now, because you bought clothing as one of the things, and you might have bought food and gas and all kinds of other things on the credit card, making your minimum payments, none of these things can be returned and you get the same amount of money back. So number one, they can't be returned because you have consumed them. So that's why they're called consumer goods. But the other reason, yes, you can in some cases return them. Like let's say you bought juicing press, right? Because you have, like now it's season for citrus, you like to do lemon juice and orange juice and all kinds of juices like that. So you bought yourself a citrus press. And let's say you paid $50 for it and you put it on the credit card. Now, if you say, oh, I listened to Dave Ramsey, I should get rid of my debt, I want to sell this juicer so that I get my money back, you would never get $50 back. You can be lucky if you get $10 back, assuming you get somebody to buy a used juicer. So that's depreciation, right? That means that the value of the good that you bought has depreciated, has gone down since you bought it. An example that you probably have heard a lot of times is cars, right? Where the saying goes like, as soon as you drive a brand new car off the lot, you lose 10 to 15%, and within the first 3 years, probably 40% of the value. The funny thing is actually there are some stories where people have tried to prove that point. So they bought a car, they drove it off the lot, and then first tried to sell that car that they literally just bought the same day or in that same week to another dealer of the same brand, like I don't know, BMW, Volkswagen, GM dealer, just another dealer in town, and the depreciation was massive. And even when they went back to the dealer that they bought it for, and yes, I know in some states we now have rules that you have the right for 3 or in some cases up to 5 days to bring it back and no questions asked. But let's just say it is like 2 weeks later. That would still be considered a 2-week-old brand new car is basically a brand new car. Funny enough, by the way, if you look at the lot, right, in American dealerships, and you have 100 cars on the lot, the car that was sitting next to you 4 weeks later is still considered your car, the car that you bought, not next to you, next to the car that you bought. So you have 100 cars, you buy one car, the other 99 cars stay on the lot. 2, 3, 4 weeks later, they're still there. They are still considered new cars. If you want to bring yours back, same age, just a few miles on it, you would get massively less. That's a depreciating asset, if you even want to call it an asset and not a consumer good. So over time, this thing is going to be worth 0. And if you buy it with a credit card or with a loan, then that's what I would also agree with Dave Ramsey is bad debt. Because at the end, you might come to a situation, like take the example of a car, you finance it for 6 years, 72 months, and after 6 years, if you were to try to sell it, it's probably almost nothing or very, very little left from what you actually paid. So you basically have an asset that lost almost all of its value. Now let's compare that to good debt. And that's where our strategy for out-of-state turnkey residential real estate investing comes in, because we are not buying cars, we are not buying clothes, we are not buying fruit juicers, we are buying houses. And if you look in the market, what's kind of interesting is I mentioned earlier in the word ideal for the letter D, depreciation exists as well. Because the government says that your house is seen like a machine in a factory, and over 27 and a half years, you can depreciate it on the books. So over 27 and a half years, if you wait that long on the books in your tax return, the value of that house would be zero. But the reality that we all know is the value of the house typically increases at least with inflation. And in times like right now, in 2020, depending on exactly where your house is, you had appreciation anywhere between 10 and 20%, right? So that's the true appreciation versus the depreciation on the books. And then the question becomes, is Dave Ramsey right when he says, live a life without debt? And that's where the rub comes in. Because a lot of people say, Dave, for people who have fallen on hard times, who have basically drank the Kool-Aid of you can have everything, you just need a credit card and you put it on the credit card and you pay later, that's a very bad habit, a very bad way of handling your money, a very bad way to go through life, and ultimately it will catch up to you, right? When people start having a credit card to pay another credit card to pay another credit card. That's bad debt, that's bad behavior, that is something that needs to be rooted out and eliminated. And I think everybody who has learned from Dave, and even people who don't necessarily agree with him like myself on everything, I would still say, Dave, you did a great service and keep doing a great service for anybody who, especially when you see how many of these credit card offers are being sent to college students or people who just started a job and so forth, led to believe that they can have everything they want as long as they put it on a credit card and nobody really tells them about the consequences. Dave does that and provides a great service. The thing that he, in my view, doesn't do enough is to point out the difference between good debt and bad debt. Because saying you should live a life without debt also means you live a life that doesn't allow you to use leverage. And if you accept that good debt means something that has increase in value, appreciation associated with it, even if you buy something at a time when the price may not appreciate as much as you were hoping for. But if you look at an out-of-state turnkey residential real estate investment, you're buying a house. You're not buying that, or you should, at least from our strategy, not buy it for a year or two or three. You should buy it with the intention of keeping it basically forever. That's why part of the strategy is also called buy and hold. And why is that? Well, think about it. If you buy it now and the tenants pay rent to you, so you can pay property tax, you can pay insurance, you can pay off the mortgage, and you have money to put into the reserves and maybe even have some positive cash flow, which right now in most cases you would. That positive cash flow will ultimately lead to your time freedom point where the total of all your positive cash flow, your passive income, will exceed your expenses. But that's only the goal for now. When you get to that goal, for the first house, it might take you 12, 13, 15 years to get to that goal, and then subsequent houses that you buy until that goal is reached. But after that time freedom point, a few years later, that first house that you bought, the mortgage may be paid off. And so your positive cash flow that may have been in the beginning $200 or $300, when the mortgage is paid off, will be $800, $900, $1,000. So it massively increases your passive income from the same investment. Now here comes the point where I am diverging from Dave. Dave would say, try to save enough money so you can buy that house and continue to live debt-free. The problem with that is, yes, you would be collecting that full amount of passive income when you get to that point. But think about how much more efficient it is if you can actually, by that same point where you have enough to buy that $150,000 house, and I start with a $25,000 down payment and get the rest of the money financed, by the time you have $150,000 together, I am most likely going to have 8 houses. And each one of them initially will give me positive cash flow. Each one of them will increase in value through appreciation. But more importantly, when we reach the time freedom point and beyond, each one over time will get paid off through the rent. And you will never cash that up. You can sit down, do a spreadsheet, or go on Google and do a comparison. Buying an asset right now for full price versus buying it with a leverage of 20% down, 80% finance. And you keep doing this and this is under the assumption that you could actually save $150,000 over time. So putting that money aside, and every time you're 25, you buy, or 20 or 25, you buy another house. By the time you get to the finish line, the person who bought a house with leverage will be way, way ahead of everybody else. So there's no doubt. And so that's as good and as admirable it is that Dave is telling people how to get out of foolish decisions they made, piling on debt through credit cards and stuff like that. He is missing that one component to say, when you get to that point, that you cleaned up your old credit history, that you got yourself a good credit score, how can you now start building? I always hope that the people that come to us at Idea Wealth Grower are not too far in the hole, so that we don't need to help you do the work that Dave Ramsey does so well, that you are at a point where you have maybe a little bit of debt, but you're also accumulating and saving money, and based on that, we can then help you to actually get into this out-of-state turnkey residential real estate investing strategy, build your cash flow, and reach your time freedom point. So that's where the rub with Dave comes from. If you just focusing exclusively of getting out of debt and then remaining out of debt forever, you're robbing yourself of the opportunity to use leverage, the L in ideal, that will allow you to build a portfolio of investment real estate assets that will ultimately not only get you to become an accredited investor, but it will also lead to a point where you no longer have to necessarily exchange time for money. And there is a little cherry on the icing of that cake. And that cherry is that, yes, if you work all your life or most of your life and you pay into Social Security and so forth, there is an expectation that that will be there when you retire. But if you build that passive income stream to reach your time freedom point, then that will only be the cherry on the icing on the cake and not something that you're really dependent on, because you created and built your passive income stream for yourself and forever, and your heirs can take over and start at a better point than you started and keep going, collecting that passive income and growing that portfolio. So Dave does a great job to get people out of debt and out of bad credit scores. And I wish he would also help people understand that for good debt, using leverage to build equity and build assets that actually perform and increase and appreciate in value is the other side of that coin. So I hope you understand why, on the one hand, I like what Dave does for people who went down the wrong track, and why I wish that he would actually change his tune a little bit when it comes to using leverage and using debt to build a passive income portfolio. So I hope you like this information. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, leave some comments in the comments, maybe also some suggestions for other videos that you would like us to do. And I would like to also ask you to share the video. Partially by watching it, you tell the YouTube algorithm that you actually like the content, but by sharing it and let other people in your network see it too, not only do you do a service to them so they understand better what this stuff is all about and why some people love Dave Ramsey and some people have a little bit of an ambivalent relationship to him, or a view of what he is actually suggesting because he's only looking at one side of the coin. And so by doing that, you help everybody out. So be well, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.